When people ask me if I'm an optimist, pessimist, or realist, I always say that I'm a pessimist. Even though that's not entirely true, I like saying that I'm a pessimist to see how people react upon hearing the answer. And most people, as you'd expect, follow up with more questions like, why are you a pessimist? Is it good to be a pessimist? So you don't believe good things can happen in life? You don't look like a pessimist? So on and so forth. I usually let the chit chat go on for a bit before revealing the truth. The truth being that I'm not only not a pessimist, I'm exactly the opposite. Sometimes irrationally so. Because if you want to live a great life, you have absolutely no choice but to be an irrational optimist. Now, before I go any further, let me just come clean and say that whatever I said about people asking me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist is total BS. In real life, people don't want to talk to me. I just said that to prove a point. Now, going back to the topic. Like I said, if you want to live a great life, you have no choice but to be an irrational optimist. And upon hearing that, you might ask, but how can being anything irrational be a good thing? It's called irrational for a reason, right? To that, I'd respond by saying, you're not as rational as you believe yourself to be. None of us are. Most people, including myself, no matter what they say, in their heart of hearts are irrationally optimistic about their life. Because it's the rational thing to be. Why? Because hope. Hope keeps us alive. When everything is falling apart in your life, it's that teeny tiny glimmer of hope that resides deep within you, which sometimes you refuse to acknowledge publicly, is what keeps you going for another day. Hope that even though things might not be the best right now, there'll be a day when the birds will sing, the sun will shine, and all will be right with your life. That thought isn't rational. It isn't rational because sometimes there's simply no evidence to suggest that. But you persist anyway. Your tendency to see the light at the end of the tunnel is a feature, not a bug. And it's been baked into your DNA as a result of thousands of years of evolution. But the problem here is that most people are either unaware that they're fundamentally irrational or deny being so because they see it as a weakness, or they misunderstand the concept of irrational optimism and confuse it with having blind faith. Investing your life savings into some shitcoin or crypto for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity isn't irrational optimism. Not wearing a helmet while riding a bike isn't irrational optimism. Neither is getting drunk and driving a car or trying to pray away an illness. That's called being stupid. Look, you don't have to admit being irrational anything. But if you're unaware of who you are, your true nature, you could be putting yourself in harm's way, or at the very least, severely limiting your potential. Because our irrationality and biases can either act as a superpower or as an agent of chaos and confusion. And the responsibility falls upon you to ensure that it's more of the former and less of the latter. I'll explain why in this video. When we talk about being an optimist, pessimist, or realist, it's next to impossible to classify ourselves or others into one of those categories. Because the truth is that we're all on a spectrum. We're optimistic about some things in life and pessimistic about others, and realistic about something else. And even those vary by different degrees. So when I talk about being an irrational optimist, what I'm actually talking about is the narrative you sell yourself. The narrative being, for what it's worth, life's pretty good. And if it's not so good right now, it could get better in the future. French philosopher and author Albert Camus, who popularized the concept of absurdism, wrote about the futility of trying to find meaning in a largely meaningless world. Camus, who's known for his philosophical work on the absurdity of human existence, might not immediately be associated with being an optimistic guy, but his perspective on absurdism could be interpreted as a form of unconventional optimism. Even though he argued that life is absurd and devoid of any inherent meaning, he also said that It's on each and every one of us to assign meaning and purpose to our lives. In a way, this notion of living authentically with passion and integrity without any promise of ultimate reward or meaning can be seen as a sign of irrational optimism. Our tendency to be irrationally optimistic is not a bug, it's a feature that could greatly improve our lives for the better or make it the worst ever. Like I said, knowing how to use your irrational optimism to your advantage is a superpower. But it doesn't work for most people because they don't know how to make it work. And the number one reason it doesn't work for most people, the reason they don't get the health, wealth, and relationships they desire, is because they're unknowingly, irrationally optimistic about matters that they shouldn't be. They're irrationally optimistic about the economy, irrationally optimistic about the country's politics, irrationally optimistic about the role other people should play in their lives. Basically, irrationally optimistic about things that are mostly outside of their control or influence. When in fact, the only thing that they have to do to turn the tides in their favor is be irrationally optimistic about themselves. Let me say that again. The only thing you have to do to turn the tides in your favor is to be irrationally optimistic about yourself. In other words, place your bets on yourself. Look, you can be optimistic about the country's economy, believe that your favorite politicians lie awake at night thinking about you, and trust other people to be good towards you. But the only person you should put your complete faith on is yourself, because you're the one who's in control of you. When you do that, you realize that you have more control over things in your life than what you previously thought. Even though, in the grand scheme of things, control is but a mere illusion, in your day to day experience, being optimistic puts you in the driver's seat of your life. And what's the advantage of being in the driver's seat? Well, it's the driver's seat. There are many advantages, but today I'd like to talk about only three that I think are the most important. Number one being living a life with fewer regrets. In one of my earlier videos titled Life is a Regret Minimization Game, I talked about how living is synonymous to suffering, and since life has no clear goals, rules, or boundaries, and practically no guarantees whatsoever, the best outcome we can realistically hope for in our quest to live a full life is to reach the end of our life with as few regrets as possible. The core essence of the regret minimization game lies in the underlying principle that states that there's no such thing as bad decisions, only bad perceptions. You either win or you learn, am I right? The point of this game, mind you, is not to win in the traditional sense, meaning always getting what you want, but to eliminate the mind's regret of not trying. The regrets that haunt us till the end of our life because we were once too afraid to take a chance, too afraid to change jobs when we wanted to, too afraid to switch careers or start a business, too afraid to confess our love for someone, or not saying or doing that should have been done. What taking full responsibility over your life does is that it gives you the power to make mistakes and be okay with that. Say, hey, I made some bad choices that seemed good at that time, but I'm okay with that. I'm glad I tried it out and got it out of my system. Like I said, there's no such thing as bad decisions, only bad perceptions. The second biggest advantage of being irrationally optimistic is that you can have better relationships. That's right. When it comes to having relationships, be it in your personal life or your professional life, you have to be irrationally optimistic about the other person. By that, I don't mean going around town smiling and shaking hands, being a swell guy, asking everyone to join you in having a jolly good time, or giving anyone access to your life if they've expressed interest in doing so. By all means, vet people like you usually do and set the terms and conditions of the relationship when the time is right. When I say be irrationally optimistic about the other person, I mean to say that be irrationally optimistic after the relationship has been established. Because let's face it, If you've already accepted people to play a part in your life, any part, you might as well assume they feel the same way as you do and want what's best for you, or at the very least, wishes you no harm. You know, if you've made a new friend, entered into a romantic relationship, or started a new business with multiple people, it definitely helps to believe that they're your own people rather than strangers who only care about themselves. Disclaimer: being irrationally optimistic about others isn't the same thing as having sky high expectations or placing uncalled for responsibilities on others. Responsibilities that you know that you wouldn't be able to fulfill if they were given to you. Us humans are social animals, and like it or not, we need other humans to achieve many things that would be unachievable if we try to do it alone. A great business, for instance, is rarely ever built by one person. For it to be successful, it helps if you have good employees, partners, vendors, and other people who play their respective roles diligently and to the best of their ability. Sometimes things don't work out. Employees leave or you're forced to fire them. Partnerships fall apart and marriages end. It hurts like a bitch, and you take a vow to never make that same mistake ever again. But let me ask you this: would you have reached where you're now if those people had not been with you for as long as they were there? Look, it's okay. Relationships end and people move on. That's just life. You can't let that change you into being someone who's perpetually cynical and distrustful and always assuming the worst in others. Unless you plan to be a hermit, that's no way to live a life. So be optimistic, irrationally optimistic about the potential and goodness of other people. But keep your expectations on a short leash. Don't expect something from someone else that you wouldn't expect from yourself, okay? In other words, only hold others to the same standard as you would be willing to rise up and meet. And finally, the third reason is accomplish great things. This is kind of vague, but hear me out. You have one life, and even that life, no matter what you do, is ultimately pointless. One day, you'll be dead, and a few generations from now, you'd be forgotten. And even if you do manage to become someone whose name is written in history books, it'll one day be erased because one day the sun will cool off, the earth will disappear, the known universe will disappear, and then the galaxy will change or morph into something else entirely. I don't know. The point is that nothing will remain as it is now. On a cosmic scale, the average human lifespan is very, very short. So short that most of us will reach the end of our lives without leaving behind anything of impact or significance. Like a match that doesn't even burn long enough to light a candle. And knowing all of this, do you want to spend your one precious life always looking over your shoulder, doubting others, and keeping everyone at arm's length just because there's a possibility that they might disappoint you one day? I don't know about you, but that sounds extremely cynical and dissatisfying to me. To live a great life, not just an okay one, you have no choice but to be irrationally optimistic about your own capabilities, your future, and the people you're close with. Remember, our civilization was built on the backs of irrational people. People who imagined something that was never thought possible and then turned their imagination into reality. If you're starting a business, you have to be irrationally optimistic because you already likely know that 75% of all businesses don't exist after 5 years. When you're entering into a marriage and you want it to be a good one, you have to be rationally optimistic that yours will work out and not end up in a divorce. 6 years ago, when my friend and I were starting our first company, we had to be rationally optimistic and believe that our company would be the one that's successful. Heck, even to run this YouTube channel, I have to be rationally optimistic about the future and keep producing content, despite the fact that my videos get little to no views, and despite knowing that the situation is unlikely to change anytime soon. To do anything worthwhile, you have to believe that you're the one who can do so, despite having every evidence to support the contrary. Because the other alternative, that is making every major life decision based on logic and reasoning is the surest way to lead a sad and unfulfilling life. So, did I convince you to be irrationally optimistic? Yes, no, maybe? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video, send it to a friend who might find it helpful. I appreciate you all for sticking around till the end. See ya.